Chef Des coming at you from my kitchen again, and today we're gonna make fresh pasta. I'm gonna show you how easy this is. And one of my favorite eggs I like to use when making fresh pasta are Country Golden Yolks. Country Golden Yolks are free-range eggs since 1989, and they're locally owned and family-run in the beautiful Fraser Valley. Okay, to get started on this fresh pasta, we need some flour. Weighing is the best because you want to make sure your ingredients are exactly the amount you need, as best you can anyway. I'll explain in a minute. So we weighed out 10 ounces of flour. You can use a double O flour, which is more high gluten, which is ideal for pasta, but all I'm using today is all-purpose flour. So that's 10 ounces. If you do want to measure it in cups, that's about 2 cups sifted. And we're just gonna make it here on the countertop. Old school, okay, it's gonna be fun. The one thing you're always supposed to do is create a well in your flour for the eggs. What a lot of people do that's a mistake is they take a fork and they try and make a well with a fork, and it's really difficult to create that well while maintaining high size so you don't losing the liquid ingredients. So what I like to do instead is bring that flour back together, and I use a measuring cup to make that well. So I just take any size measuring cup, put it in the center, and just do it in circles, and it creates nice high sides, so you're not gonna lose any of your liquid ingredients. That brings us to our beautiful Country Golden Yolks eggs. We're gonna use 2 large eggs, so we'll just crack them in here. And then 4 egg yolks. We're gonna use the extra egg yolks to make it nice and rich, and it's just gonna be beautiful. How I like to separate my eggs is just with my fingers. So I'm gonna save those whites, put them in my omelet or something tomorrow, maybe make some meringues, but for now I'm just going to steal the yolks. And I just let the whites flow through my fingers like that so I can coddle that nice little egg yolk and put it in our dish. Go through and do the rest of these. Sometimes when your eggs are fresh like that, it takes a little bit to get the whites separated, but it'll happen, just be persistent. All right, there's the 4th one. All right, to that, we're gonna add 1 teaspoon of salt, and we're gonna start bringing this together. So what I do is I take a fork and I just pop all the yolks. Look at those beautiful yolks. And basically make some scrambled eggs in the center. You don't have to go too far with the scrambled eggs, just get them mixed up. And then you just slowly start bringing in some of the flour from that well, but look at how it's being contained there. And whenever you bring in flour, another big mistake that people make that just takes them so much more time is they take the eggs and they mix and mix and mix until all the flours combine before they introduce more flour, then they do that again. You don't need to do that. Just keep adding some flour as you're mixing, and that'll make it nice and thick. And pretty soon, it doesn't matter if the wall breaks because it's so thick, it's just gonna stay there anyway. So I continue mixing with the fork until it gets too thick where I can't mix with the fork any longer. And you'll see that, it'll come together and it'll be just too thick to continue with a fork. And so at that point, I switch to what's called a bench scraper, okay? And this tool here is a great tool with baking, helping to keep flour contained on your countertop, so on and so forth, when you're making breads, biscuits, pastry for pie, anything like that. And you just scrape it along your countertop just to help keep everything contained. But I'm also going to use it for the first part of bringing this dough together to save my hands from getting all covered with the pasta dough at this stage because it's a really shaggy mess. Look at this, but it will come together. I start using my second hand now to keep it contained, to help pressing it into a dough. Mainly using my bench scraper though, at this point, until we start blending all those beautiful eggs into the flour. And then we're going to switch to just using hands now. I'm gonna clean off this bench scraper. And you're getting your hands a little bit dirty, but hey, that's okay. We're gonna do it rustic style, right on the countertop by hand. This beautiful fresh pasta. And at first it's gonna seem dry. Look at how dry this is, right? You're gonna think, oh, I need to add more liquid. Just knead it for a minute or two to have it come together. Give that flour a chance to really absorb the moisture in those eggs before you start judging it, okay? and you'll see what I mean. And again, I just use the dough to keep it contained. If you want to bring back your bench scraper, you can do that, and we'll just knead it for a minute or so, and then we will judge the dough. It's too dry or too wet. And you might be thinking, well, if you weighed your flour, how can there be a variance? You weighed the flour. But even though we use large size eggs, there's still a variance when they grade the eggs for sizing. So you could have some that are on the larger scale of large, and you could have some that are on the smaller scale of large. So you never know exactly how much egg you're getting. So you may have a variance. It may be too wet. It may be too dry. If it's too wet, you add a little bit of flour, but don't add too much, just a little bit of time. I'll show you that. If it's too dry, you add a little bit of water. You can just literally run your fingers underneath the tap. Not a lot. Don't scoop the water into your hands because you want to add too much water. Just run your fingers through, then go back to kneading. And what you're looking for is a dough that is not sticky, but not dry. You don't want it sticking to your hands. You don't want it sticking to the countertop, but you don't want it looking dry either. So at this point, now that I've kneaded it for a minute or so, I'm going to gauge what it's like. It's not sticking to my hands, and it's not sticking to the countertop, and it doesn't look dry. So we have a perfect dough right here. Now comes the hard part. If you do want to call this hard, I want you to knead it by hand vigorously for 10 minutes. You can use a stand mixer, but I really find a stand mixer is not thorough enough in the kneading that this requires. We need to make sure that we build the gluten in this pasta dough so it can be run through rollers, run through cutters, and make your fresh pasta. So I really recommend kneading it by hand. I'm going to show you that technique. So vigorously go through. I like to walk it down the counter like this. So you're really making sure you're covering all areas of the dough. Don't just do this. You're not going to achieve very much in that 10-minute time frame. So really get at it, put your body weight into it, and make sure you're covering all areas of that dough. So I'll flip it, I'll do different sides of it, I'll roll it over, and then walk it down the countertop. And you're gonna do that literally for 10 minutes. And you'll find in that 10-minute time frame that the dough becomes nice and smooth, and at the same time, it's gonna build structure. So I'm just gonna continue that for literally 10 minutes until we have that finished dough. All right, whew. Wipe the sweat off your brow. It's not really that bad. And then you take your dough and you ball it up. You take a little bit of plastic wrap. There's no need to flour it. We just want to cover it with plastic wrap so it doesn't create a skin from sitting out. And literally just pick it up, wrap it up. Because it's not wet, it's not sticky, it's not gonna stick to the plastic wrap. And you want this to relax now for at least a half an hour, up to an hour, sitting at room temperature. Or you could put it in the fridge and leave it in there for 3 or 4 hours just to relax. So I'll see you back here in a minute. All right, it's been about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more, and we have our rested dough. The most important thing to remember at this part, at least to begin with, is make sure you're not flouring it, and I'll show you why in a second. We're gonna take that dough, take our bench scraper, and we're gonna cut it into four equal portions, just to make it a little easier to work with. So I cut it in half, and I cut each half into half to make our 4 portions. And as we're working with one, I'm just going to keep these covered a little bit. So again, without flouring it, take your dough and just flatten it, that 1 portion. Okay, in whatever shape you want, just making like a little disc or something. Doesn't really matter. And with your pasta machine, we're gonna start on the widest setting, so the rollers are the furthest apart from each other. And we're just gonna take that piece of dough and put it through your machine until it comes out the other end. Now the reason why I didn't want you to flour it to begin with, because at this point, once it's gone through there, I want you to fold it in half, and if it was floured, it would resist sticking to itself. And now we're gonna take it, and at that fold line, we're gonna put it through that same widest roller setting one more time. And we're doing it at the fold line and not this way because we don't want to have some air trapped in there, and as it goes through, it creates this big bubble and bursts on this side. So we always do it at the fold, and we put it through that widest setting a second time. At this point now, since we folded it, and we're not folding it anymore, we can take a little bit of flour and start dusting the outside. This is a great recipe. It's not sticky at all, so you don't have any worries about sticking to your machine or sticking in the cutters or anything. But just as a precaution, we're going to flour it. Now with our rollers at the second setting, second widest that is, we're gonna put it through 2 times at that setting. And what that does, it just gets it used to going through a machine, getting it used to being manipulated like this. The next closest setting, most narrow, 1 time. This is setting 4. So mine started at 1. Some pasta machines start at the higher number and they go down. Mine start at the lower number and go up. And I'm gonna go 5. Now, depending on what you're using it for, you might be using it for lasagna sheets, you might be using it for fettuccine, you might be using it for ravioli. Whatever the case may be, I'll let you decide. I usually go to a setting 6. Okay, so again, every pasta machine is a little bit different, so you're gonna have to just play around with the settings on your pasta machine. But again, mine started at 1 and I'm going to 6, so I've counted up to 6 times, and I'm about to do the 6th one right here. And today I'm gonna make some fettuccine, and I'll show you that. So for fettuccine, I like it at my setting 6 on this pasta machine. And you'll get used to your pasta machine what you like. And I would actually use that same setting if I was making lasagna, and I would cook these sheets just like this. If I was making ravioli, where I'm going to be having a double layer of pasta, surrounding the filling, I may go 1 more thinner because it's gonna be 2 layers of pasta and I don't want it to be too thick. But at this point right now, what I do is I just flour it, okay? Flour both sides. And I let it sit while I do the same thing with those other 3 chunks of dough. I am gonna show you that one more time, just so you have it, and then we'll go on to cutting. When you move on to your other pieces of dough, again, make sure that they don't get flour on them because you're gonna be folding it. So again, I just flatten it out. Remember to put your setting back to the widest setting. Again, I'm starting at 1 on my machine, and feed it through there. Taking that dough on a spot that's not floured on your countertop, again, we're just going to fold it. It makes more of a rectangular shape, it's easier to work with, and then put it through that widest setting a second time. After it's gone through that widest setting 2 times, now you can dust it with a little bit of flour because you won't be folding it anymore. The second setting, a little narrower. And you're going through that second setting 2 times without folding it. And again, it's just to get it used to being manipulated. Setting 3, just once. Setting 4, just once. Setting 5, just once. And I'm gonna do setting 6 just once. But I wanna show you this as well. Watch what I do. So as soon as the pasta machine catches it in the rollers, I just let it go and I move my hand over to this side just to help guide it. So when I'm doing this, I'm not pulling on the pasta dough, I'm not stretching it, I'm just using my hand to guide it where I want it to go as it's coming through. So it's nice and flat and laid out. Then I will put it on top of this other floured sheet that I have, remembering that it's already floured on that side, and then I just flour the top. I'll do those other 2 pieces of dough later because I want to show you the cutting now. Every pasta machine will come with a cutter, fettuccine and spaghetti. I like to use the fettuccine cutter. It's just better texture, I think. I like the thicker noodles. And then you take your handle and you insert it in the cutter that you want to use, okay? My pasta machine, can you hear that? It's squeaking. It's so old. I bought this in 1989 and I paid $60 for it. And at the time, that was a lot of money. But here we are, over 30 years later, and it's still going strong, so it was well worth every single penny. Nowadays, be prepared to spend anywhere from $100 to $250 on a good Italian-made pasta machine, and you'll have no problems at all. Now we're gonna feed it through the cutters. Just get it, the point or the end that you're using is at the cutters, and start turning your cutters, and it will feed in there. As soon as it grabs the pasta dough, let it go. And again, I'm going to switch hands and put this hand over here. That's really noisy, isn't it? And just guide my pasta. Again, I'm not pulling on it, I'm not stretching it. I'm just using it as a guide. And And look at this beautiful fresh pasta you have. And as soon as I have it through the cutters, I just dust it just with a tiny bit of flour, and I make a little nest, and I set it aside. Let me show you that one more time, then I'm gonna give you some great points on storing that and freezing it if you want to. So again, getting that point of that dough hot in the cutters. My good old squeaky machine, but it's never failed me yet. And then just grabbing it, guiding it, not pulling it, until I have this beautiful fresh pasta again. And look at the color of that fresh pasta because of those beautiful yolks. Amazing. And dust it with a little bit of flour. Now for storing this, I don't dry my pasta. You can buy these drying racks where you can dry your freshly made pasta. To me, I think it's crazy. You went through all this effort of kneading it by hand for 10 minutes to have fresh pasta, and then you're going to dry it? Don't do that. What I want you to do instead is cook it fresh. If you can't cook it fresh today, then you can store it in the fridge, and I would literally just take that plastic wrap and wrap each nest or a couple of nests together or in a tightly sealed container and put it in your fridge, and it'll be ready to go within the next 2 or 3 days for you. And you just literally drop it from cold temperature in the fridge into your boiling hot water. And at this setting, the setting 6 on mine for that thickness for fettuccine, it's about a 4-minute cook time. And it'll be the same from fridge temperature. That change in temperature of the dough won't really play a part in the cooking time of having it cook any longer. You can also freeze this. And what I recommend is get a container that the nest, let's say I had 4 of them here, okay? Let's say I had the 4. I'll put these here just for argument's sake. And you have a container that fits the 4 nests easily. So you have your container like this. I would literally just put that container with the lid in the freezer. And anytime you want fresh pasta, well, from frozen, you would open that container, and once your boiling water is ready, literally from frozen, take that frozen nest and put it in the pasta water. And it will thaw almost immediately. You maybe have to add an extra minute of cooking time, but at any given time, you can have fresh pasta from frozen anytime you like, just by doing that. The other option you can do is you can put them in a bag, but I don't want you to put them in the bag in the freezer when they're fresh, because what's gonna happen, here's the bottom of the bag, let's say, and you're putting the fresh pasta in, you're putting your next in there, you're putting your next one and your next one, it's all going to meld together, and you're gonna have big troubles trying to separate that once it's all frozen in one big lump. So if you wanna store it in a bag in the freezer, what I recommend you do instead, take your 4 nests, 8 nests, however many recipes of pasta dough you're doing, have them floured like that, put them on parchment paper on a baking sheet, and drop that baking sheet in your deep freeze for about 3 or 4 hours until each nest is frozen solid individually. Then take your bag, as they're frozen, stack them in there, seal up the bag, put them in your freezer right away. Then at that point, you can just grab an individually frozen nest from your freezer bag and put it directly in your pasta water. I know you're gonna have a lot of fun experimenting with this recipe. My recipes demand great ingredients, like the greatness in Country Golden Yolks free-range and organic eggs. Make sure you're checking out the website at countrygoldenyolks.com. And this is Chef Des signing out. Where are you getting your protein from?